Welcome to an overview of education in emergencies. This presentation will define education in emergencies, its purpose in global and local societies, as well as relevant case studies. But first, we must take a moment to address what a humanitarian response is. A humanitarian response is aid and action designed to save lives, alleviate suffering, and maintain and protect human dignity during and in the aftermath of man-made crises and natural disasters, as well as to prevent and strengthen preparedness for the occurrence of such situations. For the past few decades, humanitarian aid has been focused on the following primary sectors: food, health, water, sanitation, and shelter in the instance of emergencies. For UNICEF, emergencies include natural disasters such as floods and earthquakes, and human-made crises such as civil strife and war, as well as silent emergencies such as HIV/AIDS, extreme poverty, and children living on the streets. Within the grand scheme of humanitarian aid, in 2015, only 31% of funding requests for education were met, leaving 69% of funding requests for education unmet. The amount of funding provided for education in 2015 was only $644 million. In 1989, the Convention on the Rights of the Child pushed governments and agencies to take emergency action towards providing education to displaced children and refugees. They realized that education provides a feeling of normalcy, stability, and routine, which can reduce fears. Also, there is no guarantee that these children will be home in weeks, months, or years. The CRC encourages governments to promote or facilitate access to education for children within their territory regardless of their status. Beginning in the 1990s, humanitarian response incorporated education as one of the key areas for attention. Many organizations began to provide support for education of emergency-affected populations. This is when the term education in emergency gained ground. The term education in emergencies increasingly serves as shorthand for schooling and other organized studies, together with normalizing structured activities arranged for and with children, young people, and adults whose lives have been disrupted by conflict and major natural disasters. Education in emergencies, according to the UNHCR Handbook for Emergencies, is education in situations where children lack access to their national education systems due to man-made crises or natural disasters. Here are examples of situations that call for education in emergencies.
Aya practices writing her name over and over again. She is 8 years old and loves to learn.
Aya, 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 Aya.
She is also a Syrian refugee.
أنا أحب سوريا، أشتغل سوريا وأحب رفقاتي ونلعب أنا وأختي وجمع العجيات نلعب أنا وياهن ونلعب بالبسكليتات ونلعب بالهيك بالألعاب.
There are now 1 million Syrian refugee children spread across the region. Aya is one of them. She has seen war firsthand, experienced flight.
صار يضربوا على الدار، من ضربوا الدار مشينا ما ضلينا صرنا نبكي ونحن ندحج على الدار صرنا نبكي بعد صرنا نبكي لمن اجينا لهون.
Home for her and her 6 brothers and sisters is this makeshift tent in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley. Her father's pride and joy was that he had been able to educate his children, boys and girls alike. Aya has not been to school for 2 years now and has little prospect of going soon.
ما تم عندي غير هاي ما تعلمت وصغيرة ذيك الدرويش ولا التالي ما بقى كله تعلمت ولا من الأمور يعني بترجع رجوع يراجعون كتبهم كلها.
Aya keeps busy helping around the house. and looking after her disabled sister.
أنا صير دكتورة مشان للأطفال. الأطفال إذا أجوا علي ما بيعطوني مصاري ولا شيء، بكتب لهم ورقة، بعطيهم دواء، بغزن إبرة، بتروح.
A whole generation of Syrian children like Aya have been affected by this conflict. Their lives and futures on hold as the violence continues, unabated. Some children have to go to work, others are marrying young. But all of them will never forget what they have lived through. Aya can't look into the future. She doesn't know if she can go back to Syria. She finds a way to smile, clinging to those that are most dear to her, and dreams of an end to the war.
These children, they have never been to school since 2013. There was no school, there was no organization providing education services here in Melut, especially in this area deep campus. Previously, we don't have these children. They were sitting on the ground in the classroom were made of grasses, and it was leaking during the rainy season. It was very hot during this hot season. Once we constructed this classroom and we furnished this classroom, the children are very happy and they are sitting and they are comfortably attending classes.
EIE offers children a safe and supervised environment to engage in structured activities. EIE also helps children build resilience, learn to cope with risks, provides care for vulnerable groups such as girls, ethnic minorities, and those with disabilities, and can protect children from exploitation and abuse. EIE fosters hope in children and in communities, provides psychological support, and helps children build literacy and numeracy skills which can benefit them economically in the future. While EIE does have numerous benefits, there is no one-size-fits-all framework, policy, or approach. Each nation has specific cultural and ethnic needs that must be addressed and considered when implementing education and emergency programs. Education in emergencies most importantly benefits children and youth. Children, about 37 million primary and lower secondary age children, are out of school in crises-affected countries. Refugees and IDPs. There are at least 14 million refugee and internally displaced children aged 3 to 15 in affected countries. Only half go to primary school and 1 in 4 to lower secondary. Girls. Girls are disproportionately affected, especially by conflict. Children with disabilities. More than 90% of children with disabilities in developing countries are not attending school, and this figure will grow in crises. Parents. Having a safe place for children to learn allows parents more time to organize their lives and possibly work outside of the home. Communities. Education can act as a catalyst for peace building and cooperation. Additionally, children can learn about health and sanitation that they can share with families and community members. Nations. Education is a catalyst for development and rebuilding a nation after disaster. Education can resocialize children to the expected norms of a society. According to the preamble to the CRC, the child should be fully prepared to live an individual life in society and brought up in the spirit of the ideals proclaimed in the Charter of the United Nations, and in particular in the spirit of peace, dignity, tolerance, freedom, equality, and solidarity. Article 28(1) states that parties recognize the right of the child to education. 3. States that parties shall promote and encourage international cooperation in matters related to education. Article 29(1) states that parties agree that the education of the child shall be directed to the development of all aspects of the child, including the child's freedom and cultural identity, and the preparation of the child to live in a peaceful society. The CRC also states that all children, or those under the age of 18, have a right to education. Even in emergency circumstances, the best interests of the child should be considered, and the education of children in countries who are unable to sustain education for their children should be assisted by more developed countries. Children should be educated as equally as possible and should not be deprived of education due to their race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national, ethnic, or social origin, property, disability, birth, or other status. In November 2000, the Interagency Network for Education in Emergencies, INEE, was born. It caters to institutions such as UNHCR, UNICEF, and UNESCO, to name a few, as well as individuals with an interest in emergency education. The INEE, in collaboration with some of these institutions, developed the minimum standards for education in emergencies, chronic crises, and early reconstruction. The minimum standards express a commitment that all individuals, children, youth, and adults, have a right to education. The aim of the handbook is 1. To enhance the quality of educational preparedness, response, and recovery. 2. To increase access to safe and relevant learning opportunities for all learners, regardless of their age, gender, or abilities. And 3. To ensure accountability and strong coordination in the provision of education in emergencies through to recovery. Currently, these standards are being disseminated through regional training of trainers and subsequent national and local training. Per Susan Nicola in her article, Education in Emergencies, a Toolkit for Starting and Managing Education in Emergencies, there are many different forms of education occurring during an emergency. There's teacher training, which selectively addresses topics that are immediately useful to teachers at that time. Formal education, or the existing education system of the host country for the refugees. Community-based education, education that occurs and supports the cultural experiences of a community. Psychosocial education, which facilitates the reconstruction of local social structures, including family, community groups, and schools, which may have been destroyed or weakened by an emergency, so that they can give appropriate and effective support to those suffering severe stress related to their experiences. Non-formal education, which includes subjects such as literacy, numeracy, hygiene, HIV/AIDS, or landmine safety, as well as recreation. Child-friendly spaces, or UNICEF's approach to safe spaces, that integrate health facilities and clean water, along with areas for children to play freely and get educated. There are many different education and emergency-specific programs, such as UNICEF's School in a Box. Its school supplies and materials for up to 80 students in double-shift classes of 40, plus supplies for the teacher are delivered in a locked box which can double as a blackboard when coated with special paint included in the kit. Using a locally developed teaching guide and curriculum, teachers can establish makeshift classrooms almost anywhere, thus ensuring the child's right to education. Children's Teacher Emergency Package. Similar to the box of learning supplies of a school in a box, this program is designed to help teachers introduce pedagogical methods of teaching basic literacy and numeracy in the country's official language. Save the Children's Classroom Activity Box. This program was designed with the thoughts that learning activities do not necessarily require children to have pencils and exercise books. This box contains basic items like ropes and flashcards to encourage learning.
Ne pensais nous tout avoir mouru que ça c'était la fin du monde. Comment l'école là les temps de la l'église là est tombé mais ça l'informatique a pas dit on va baser.
Education in emergencies means making sure that education opportunities for children are immediately in place after a natural disaster or conflict. It means setting up child-friendly spaces or temporary learning centres, giving out education supplies and rapidly training teachers. This then provides a safe place for children to go in the chaos of the aftermath. Our temporary schools can also act as a hub through which we can provide other essential services like food and health. Decades of experience has told us that getting education started again after an emergency is absolutely vital to the recovery of a community. The first thing that the parents of children say to us when we talk to them after a disaster is, please make sure our children get education. Good quality education should be one of the first things that we think about when a disaster strikes, and it must absolutely be planned into the longer term response that we will make to the disaster. Save the Children co-leads the education cluster with UNICEF, and this is the global coordination mechanism for education in emergencies. This means that we have a genuine responsibility to provide the most effective and high quality emergency education response that we can. Save the Children has allocated funds so that country programmes can set up education in emergencies projects immediately after a disaster. And Save the Children has also invested in additional high-quality technical expertise. These experts are available to be deployed to country programmes to help support the scale-up of education in emergencies.
Okay, that's so good.
By 2013, education absolutely has to be part of every large-scale emergency response.